all three of you are self-described atheists. Is there good reason to believe in God? Obviously, you'd say no.
No, I would say yes.
Oh, you'd say yes?
I said there is a good reason to believe in God in terms of why do people do it.
Right. But that's a different.
That's a difference. Yes. So if we're more specific about the question,
I'm focusing on the truth.
Yeah. So at this point, I think that if we're talking about a very, anthropic God, like a very human type of God, what you'd expect human beings to come and create, then I think no, because most of the gods you look at, there's a certain humanness to them. They tend to have male characteristics.
Are you including even monotheism?
Of course, yeah. Especially monotheistic. I would say pagan religions can be actually more diverse because they have multiple gods. But I think with monotheistic gods, if you look at the language, if you look at the rules and the legislation and the punishment, it's very human. It's very Iron Age. Okay. So for me, that's why I would say there's no real reason to. But I understand why people do it.
You think it seems as if a bunch of men have created this and projected their own thoughts onto you?
I think societies actually do it. I think societies do it sometimes even in retrospect. You go through some really hard stuff. You're trying to understand the world. You're trying to understand your space in the world. Right. Yeah. And so you retrospectively create these ideas to help you deal with what can be a very confusing and difficult to understand world.
Okay, Rihanna?
I believe there are better reasons not to believe in God. Because, the moment you what happens is that in my case, the moment I stopped believing in God, it opened me to a vast landscape of questioning anything I want without feeling guilty. It just unlocks the door to more creativity and knowledge. And I think that's
when you stopped believing in God.
Yeah, I just don't have to subscribe to just one book just to get everything I ever need. Right. Yeah. So you just have more freedom.
Okay.
Yeah. I think it depends on what we mean by reason. If we mean, for example, that our beliefs are proportioned by the evidence, then I don't think that depends what you mean by evidence, I guess. But if we think of evidence as demonstrable evidence that I can demonstrate to each of us, and we can all agree, like this is a table, for example, then I don't think that a belief in a anthropomorphic God can be justified by reason.
Okay, so Ben says there's a lack of evidence. They're also saying that there's dangers that arise as well from believing in God.
Well, I think the dangers referred to or the restrictions are questions of religion or specific faith. I think the anthropomorphic element is key, because I do believe that in antiquity all gods, certainly in the Western and Near Eastern traditions, were very anthropomorphic. There were lots of gods and goddesses which probably were once ancestors, combination needing to explain nature and projection of self. I think my understanding of what monotheism did is it asked a different question, which is, where did all of this come from? It extrapolated from the assumption, or from I think what is correct, although some debate this point, can you actually have an actually infinite amount of time, let's say, or age of things? And assuming the answer is no, which I think the answer is, then there was once a point where none of this existed. Now that's not the sort of question ancient religions were asking, because they began from when their gods began. But once one asks that question, one aims at a very non-anthropomorphic beginning to everything. If one assumes that there's therefore a non-spatial, non-temporal cause to everything, one might represent it with all sorts of adjectives, but I actually think one's talking about a completely different type of reasoning there than the type that projects characteristics on. Now, I did want to make the point also in terms of maleness of God. Certainly in biblical terms, there's both male and female names of God. The male are more prevalent because we use male whenever it's the beginning of a creative process, and female as it develops towards fruition. And therefore God is usually spoken of as presenting the ideas of creation and mankind to bring it to fruition. But there's actually both names of God, but they're clearly, what male and female means there in that context is not related to anything to do with the human notion of male and female, at least in my understanding of the tradition.
But now specifically in terms of the evidence, are there good reasons to believe in God? Do you think
well, I think that if you think about the first cause type argument, it gets nitty-gritty into all sorts of scientific cosmological things, I think they're relatively irrelevant. I think the deepest reason to, the deepest rational reason to, which is the depth behind what was originally the first cause argument, is simply a mathematical point. It's a prediction that seems, every time we have empirically tested it, it's true, which is all things we look at had beginnings. But I don't think you need science to tell you when humanity had a beginning. You did not need science to tell you that humanity had a beginning. You need science to tell you when planet Earth began. You don't need science to tell you that it began. If you can't get an extension past infinity, then everything that we see that's extensional or finite had a beginning. And there might have been universes before ours or multiverses, but they'll all once not have existed. And therefore, unless you assume that from really no space, no time, no nothing, pure nothing, nothing, unless you assume something can just come by itself, you're going to have a creator. Now, you may not link that creator to the God of religion. You may not link it to Islam or Judaism or Christianity, but I actually think that's a very rational reason to believe in an infinite.
Okay, so what Rabbi Rose is effectively saying, we'll go to you now. He's effectively saying, so as I understand, just to be clear, you're saying because everything has to have a beginning, because you believe in cause and effect, if finiteness had a beginning, then something infinite, whatever that thing is, something metaphysical, had to have caused that beginning. How do you?
Here's the issue that many scientists and philosophers have grappled with for a very long time. The issue is, if God was the first cause, who created God? And then usually
but we're defining this being as something that's infinite and therefore doesn't require a beginning.
So I mean, if you think of every being, had a creator, then the question is, if God is a being, a perfect being, who created God? And usually the religious person will say that God created himself, or God, that somehow those questions that God's existence transcends, that those questions can't be introduced in God because God is outside of space and time. I don't think it's necessarily the case that when we think of everything having having a creator, I think we are projecting part of the human way we think, we're projecting. And it's like the issue of causation, for example. Like if one billionaire hits another billionaire, and I'm saying to you, where's the causation right there? You say, I don't know, you see one billionaire hit the other billionaire. Or if I mention to you an idea of an infinite space without the boundaries, I think we find it really, really difficult. So I think this whole idea about everything having first cause, I think it reflects a very fundamental part of our human brain. And the question then is, therefore, does that part of the human brain necessarily reflect what's out there?
But isn't that all we have to go by? All we have to go by is human logic.
If I may, I think these are important. We're trying to cover thousands of years of philosophical discussion in several moments here. But I actually think that what's being argued in the first cause is that extensional things need a beginning. Extensional things weren't around forever. And I think that's something one can learn just by studying mathematics, which ultimately is the laws of the way everything has to be that's extensional. And I believe that what the claim is that there's a non-extensional first cause, that extension cannot be forever.
Immaterial substance.
I'd say, but that even these like medieval, I actually think you could use that word. I think substance already is an extensional word. I would say a non-extensional first cause, and that would be right. I would say that we can then ascribe being intelligence and start to argue for those various properties. But I would say that particular, I think is pretty rigorous. I think so. And like I say, as a prediction. The logic that it was based on happened to always work out correct. For example, as late as the midway...
Inductive logic,
I'm not using it from inductive logic. I think the real logic comes from mathematics itself. But I do think it's interesting that inductively, every time it's been tested, it's come out true. That there were plenty of physicists at the beginning of the 20th century who assumed a steady state model. The universe somehow was eternal. And I think this argument would have been sufficient to show that's incorrect before anybody discovered the Big Bang.
The problem I have with this whole conversation is when we talk about mathematics and science, I spend way too much time with physicists. That's in the scope of this universe, right? So, for example, there's a lot of theories about the universe is basically just grow, like they pop into existence and out of existence, and they follow each other. In which case, you might actually have an infinity of universes. There's also conversations about whether this universe is, nothing is a very hard thing to talk about.
Yes, that's something for another.
Because nothing here today means something to us, but it's not what we're talking about, really.
Yes.
So I think the issues I have with these conversations is it's so metaphysical, it's so in the air, right? That trying to assign what we see in this glass must have been made from somewhere, therefore there was a creator, therefore it's humans. That doesn't apply when you're looking at the universe, because we don't know what not the universe is. We actually have no idea. We have no framework to operate that, including mathematics, because mathematics dies when you go outside the universe. Because all we know is we live in the universe. Does that make sense?
It makes the point makes a lot of sense. I would slightly say mathematics is different, because if you go back to ancient times and say humans came up with, they began to notice certain things. Some things were completely incidental and contingent. You're here, I'm here, cup is here. Some things they discovered were law-like. They would have not necessarily known why gravity behaves, but you let go, it goes to the ground. Some things they discovered were mathematical. Now, sometimes we've shifted things between categories, But mathematics, it seems to me, is the study of the way things can be and cannot be. In other words, in no conceivable alternative universe, or even before we'd studied any laws of physics, we didn't know anything about quantum mechanics, for example. We didn't know whether we are a relativistic universe or not, whether our space is curved or not.
Yeah.
But we do know that no matter where we go and in what way we go, 2 + 2 will equal 4, or even more important mathematical developments, because math seems to be, to me, the study of extension itself. And therefore, whether it's 1 dimension, 6 dimensions, 155 dimensions, they're going to follow laws of geometry, or complex geometry, not complex in the sense of I, but they'll follow laws of geometry. Laws of arithmetic will apply to all forms of extension, space-time, or others we can't even conceive of. And therefore, I do think that sense that you cannot cross over into infinity, although mathematicians do go beyond it, funnily enough, but you actually cannot get extension to infinity, is something that would apply to any universe anywhere. Now, what I will concede, I do think is fair, is that there's a far gap between an argument for an infinite first cause and getting to actual religion with rules. And a person could quite conceivably believe there's something, this thing didn't come by itself, there's something that's made the multiversal universe, without having to then go into religious law and practice. That's a separate discussion and argument altogether. But I do think that belief in a first cause is not an irrational proposition at all.
Just to pick up on what kind of the theme that's running through this, are you, and we're going to have to end discussion soon because we're running out of time, but are you kind of saying that it does make some rational sense, this whole concept of the first cause argument, or the way that it's been framed today, but are you then sort of saying, well, because there's so many unknowns with regard to the nature of finiteness and infinite and universes, we just can't trust our own human intellect here?
I think for me, it's just that we have no idea what's going on when it comes to anything that's outside the realm of the universe, because we don't know if there's an outside the realm of the universe. So, I mean, we're trying to understand that through physics and things like string theory, but we have no clue. So anything that anyone says about it, including that there's definitely no God, if someone says there's definitely no God and there's definitely no first cause, they're doing the same thing that if you say that there's a... Does that make sense?
Final thoughts, everyone?
Yes, I think I'll carry on from his point. So because we have this big scarcity of information, you can actually I think the absolute truth is that there is no absolute truth, because the process of discovery is a very long journey. And so if you have this one assumption of having an absolute truth, and on that you're actually trying to build a foundation of religion on which you want to have a society evolved and everything, it's a very unstable foundation.
Just to address the point about we have no examples of something coming from nothing. A lot of these arguments, I think, pose an issue on the fact that we cannot demonstrate that it's impossible for something to come from nothing, because we have no examples of nothing. And because we have no examples of nothing, the claim that something cannot come from nothing is not demonstrated. And that's always going to be an issue for those people who argue that something cannot come from nothing, because we cannot have any nothing in which to verify that claim.
Rabbi said that.
Okay, great. I'll say, look, this needs a much bigger discussion. Let me make the points that I think are important here. I do think you're right that we have a huge gap in our knowledge, and one has to always approach any claims one makes based on physics on a not complete ignorance, but we know a lot, but on a lot of ignorance. I'm deliberately trying to avoid doing that on purpose, but I do think we had an even bigger gap of knowledge thousands of years ago, and yet there were some truths that when we worked them out then kept being true, and those were the mathematical truths. And I believe one of those truths was all extensional things have a beginning. Back then we could never guess empirically whether Earth had a beginning. But mathematics told us it did. We can never guess whether the universe had a beginning, but mathematics told us it did. And I believe that line of reasoning is correct no matter how many universes precede ours or multiverses. In terms of the something from nothing, I think you're right, and it goes into the question of what nothing is, and Lawrence Krauser wrote in his book on it, the critique. But I actually think that there's a bit of an a priori issue that if nothing really means not anything, if it really means there's no space in which an event can be, or time in which change can take place, then I think, short of having something making it, I think there's a rational point of what's actually possible. But I think what I do in the very short time I've had, I personally do believe there's a rational case for the infinite first cause, and quite a strong one at that. I'd agree there'd be work to be done in getting that anywhere near moral or religious obligation on people. What I would love to hope is that if one does go for an idea of an infinite first cause, the idea that a creator would create as an act of giving and care about everything in the world would empower any such monotheistic thought. And going back to what I said earlier, whether one takes that or not, at least the view that we have to treat everybody with respect as people in the image of God, or as people who have an indelible part to play in our human journey together, be open to all sorts of difference of opinion and build a better world.
Well,
That's
on
lovely.
that note, guys, thank you so much for coming. I really, really enjoyed this. I thought this was fascinating. And yeah, thank you so much for watching on another episode of Jewish Wisdom on JTV.